Hi, I'm Sam Adair from the law firm of Graham Adair, and I'm joined today by my partner, Chad Graham.
Hey guys.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about the alphabet soup of non immigrant visa categories here in the United States. We're going to be focusing on work visas specifically, and even more specifically, we're going to dive into alternatives to the H 1B. We want to talk about this in terms of individuals who may be applying for H-1B in the lottery this year, and if they're not selected, what alternatives might be available to them. So, Chad, thanks for joining me here today. To start off, we've got the lottery coming up here in just a little over a month. What do you think the odds are that somebody's case is going to be selected in the lottery this year?
Well, before I answer that question, I'm going to improve my situation a little bit here. For those of you who don't know, Sam is 6 feet 6. So I'm putting a pillow because I'm close to 6 feet tall, but I don't want to be a lot shorter. So I just put a pillow. Maybe this is better.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm looking you in the eyes
Yeah,
now.
we're
This
kind
is
of
great.
okay.
Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. So talking about the H-1B. So last year we had 484,000 applications, about 127,000 selections. Overall selection rate, if you were in the regular cap, was roughly 20%, as low as 20%, let's say, up to about 35% if you were in the advanced degree cap. I think it'll be probably close to the same, potentially a little bit worse. We might get some more additional applications this year, but I think it'll be around there.
Okay. Yeah. So not great odds is
Not
what
great.
you're saying.
Not
Yeah.
great. We're not going to Vegas with those odds.
No, definitely not. I think that knowing that and knowing that there are going to be people who are here in the US right now with a work visa of some sort, like work authorization, who are applying in the lottery, and this is going to be their last shot before their current work authorization expires to really get into that H 1B category. So I think it would be helpful if we sort of listed off what some of the alternative visas are that would allow somebody to stay here within the United States without having to leave and interrupt their employment. So I think there are a few that come to mind, and then you can catch me on this, but J1s could be an alternative, TN could be an alternative, H1B1 could be an alternative, O1 could be an alternative, any other like
E3.
E3, yeah, great.
Got your E3s. You got your potential for additional OPT time by getting a higher level degree.
Okay. And then L1s, but that gets a little bit more involved. So maybe let's go ahead and let's start with J1. So tell me about the J1 and how that might work.
Yeah, so there are several J1 categories that are available for trainees or for recent grads. And this is sort of, I would say, the unsung hero. We don't often hear about J1s as an alternative to an H1B. But the nice thing is it does allow somebody to stay here while they're sort of regrouping and hopefully applying for another one. What it does require is a third-party sponsor, J1 sponsor, to sponsor the visa, and it has to be connected with
The J1 trainee program. Is that what you were getting to?
That's what I was getting to.
Okay, cool. I also think that when we're talking about the J1s, we should have like in big yellow letters underneath here that there are some caveats that people should be aware of.
Yeah.
Some J1s have a 2-year home residency requirement,
yes.
which can be really painful if you get to the end of your J1 and realize before you can go into H1B status or get a green card, you have to go back and live in your home country for 2 years. And then the other thing I think with the J1 is just knowing that it is going to be for limited purposes and most often is going to be eligible for people who are doing like research or who are recent grads who are in kind of a specific training type program. So good option, but definitely want to talk to your lawyer about that before you move somebody into a J1, knowing those limitations. What about the TN? Let's talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, so there are some country specific visas that are available to people. The TN's a great one. It's for people who are citizens of Canada and Mexico who have a degree in a field that is on the trade and NAFTA agenda. And those specifically are forestry, park ranger.
Yeah, there's some funny ones on that list for sure. I think that, there are some professions that we deal with quite a bit. Engineers, scientists, people that are, working in labs, things like that. There's a technician one that sometimes works, but typically that's going to really be applicable for our clients that are in the engineering, science fields. For folks that work more on the business side, the TN can be really limited. The great thing about the TN is they're available all the time. If you're from Mexico or Canada, it's really pretty straightforward to get one as long as you kind of meet those requirements. So yeah, that can be a really good alternative. What about another one? My personal favorite is the most confusing visa category, the H-1B1.
Yes. So the H-1B1 is a good one because it sounds like an H-1B, but it's not really an H-1B. It kind of operates the same way in terms of the work authorization, but it's limited to people who are citizens of Singapore and Chile and those two countries alone. So if you happen to be from one of those countries, it's a great option, but it is a pure non-immigrant intent visa, which means that applying for a green card, an immigrant visa would be in direct conflict. So that can be an issue. The other issue is it needs to be extended on an annual basis. So it's great as a gap fill, probably not great long-term option.
Yeah. And then lastly, and I know this is your favorite, the E3 for citizens of Australia. I'm not going to do an Australian accent. You thought I
I
was, but I'm not.
was hoping you would.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it should be an A visa for Australia, but I guess that was already taken.
It is.
So they
Yeah.
went with E. That was the next one available. Yeah, so E3 it operates very similarly to an H-1B. Again, pure non-immigrant intent visa, but it does provide for an initial 3 years of work authorization. So it's a little bit better from that standpoint. So if you happen to be from Australia, check out the E3.
Yeah, solid. And then I think lastly, on kind of the work visa front, the O1 visa is another option that's sometimes available. You want to talk about that just a little
Yeah,
bit?
so the O1 visa is fantastic. It's the visa that everybody thinks they qualify for, that not very many people qualify for. O1 is restricted to those who have extraordinary ability and can demonstrate that on a national or an international level. So what does that mean? It means they've won either a major prize or award that everyone's aware of. We're talking like a Nobel Peace Prize or maybe a Golden Globe.
I bet we could get an O for somebody who had a Golden
Golden
Globe.
Globe.
Yeah, I would be very confident about
All right. If you don't have one of those, you might still be able to qualify if you have publications in major journals of significant circulation, articles written about the work that you've done, research that you've done, if you have patents or other proof of novelty that you've created within the industry. What am I missing here? Memberships and organizations that require significant achievement in order to be a member.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it really stacks up pretty comparably to like the EB1 green card process, either the extraordinary ability EB1A or the outstanding researcher classification. You really have to be able to demonstrate some pretty impressive stuff. You would qualify. I definitely would not. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about F1
Okay.
options. So I think that there are kind of a couple of different paths. So let's talk first about one of my least favorite topics, which is day one CPT.
Okay.
So, what is day one CPT?
Often, an international student program will require that the person go to school for at least a semester or even a year sometimes before they can get work authorization. There are some institutions that do allow that work authorization right off the bat, but the concern there is if the work authorization is more than part-time and it pulls into that full-time category, it can count against the time the person is eligible for OPT at the conclusion of their degree program.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too to note that you want to make sure that as you're exploring day one CPT programs, that you're working with an accredited, well-respected institution, and that day one CPT is directly related to your program of study. Otherwise, it could be viewed negatively by the USCIS on future applications and could lead to potential issues down the road with future H-1B or even a green card application.
Now, is there a general rule of thumb here for universities that are government supported versus for-profit organizations?
Great question. So, for-profit institutions have limited ability to issue OPT and CPT. They can issue CPT, but if you go to a for-profit institution, you are not eligible for STEM OPT.
Okay.
And so let's talk a little bit about OPT as an option. So if somebody's been here in the US for a year on their OPT, and let's say they have a science, technology, engineering, or math degree, we know they're eligible for 2 more years of optional practical training as long as they were at a nonprofit institution of higher education. But what if somebody uses up all 3 years of their OPT? Is there a way that they can get more OPT?
There is.
Oh,
There
let's
is. There's
talk
a
about
magic
that.
bullet to this. Yeah.
Wow.
But it does require that
Did
you
I
go to,
ask a leading question?
you asked the leading question, and I'm going to walk right into it. And but what it does require is that you go back to school. So school's out for summer, but then you got to go back to school. You got to get a higher level degree. So if you had a bachelor's degree, you got to go get a master's. If you had a master's, you got to go get a PhD. A higher level degree that can open up a new round of optional practical training the 1 year after graduation, and then the additional extensions, STEM extensions afterwards, if it's a STEM field.
So that's going to lead then to, more likely than not, a gap in work authorization or full-time work potentially for somebody who's going to be going back and doing that.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
While we're on that topic, I guess options that would involve a gap in work authorization in the US, let's talk a little bit about the L1.
Okay.
Basically, the L1 is a work visa category in the US that's designed for intra-company transferees, and it requires that somebody work for 12 months outside of the United States for a company that has a related entity in the US, and then that they be transferred back to the United States to work in either a professional position or in a managerial or executive position. So the downside of this is it requires somebody to go outside of the US for a year. It can be a little complicated sometimes finding those positions and then bringing somebody back. But what's the upside to this here on the Ls?
Well, the L1's a very popular work visa, and it's a great one in terms of being considered a dual intent status. So somebody in L1 status can start the green card process as well. The drawback is that it's limited. Unlike an H-1B, where if certain steps are taken toward the green card process, the H-1B can be extended almost indefinitely. L1 does not operate that way. There's the L1A, which is for executives and managers, and those are eligible for 3 years plus a 2-year extension and another 2-year extension, so 7 years total. For those in L1B, which is specialized knowledge, meaning they have some sort of specific knowledge about the company or a process or something that's critical that they bring to the United States, that individual can do 3 years plus 1 2-year extension, so 5 years total. If it's somebody from a country where there's not a long wait time for an immigrant visa, it can be great. They can go straight from the L1 to green card.
Mm-hmm.
If it's somebody from India and China, for example, where the wait times are much longer, then they're going to have to get another status, hopefully an H-1B at some point.
Okay. Just really quickly, I think that in most instances, employment-based sponsorship for the green card is not likely to solve one of these gaps in work authorization. But sometimes, we can look to spouses. And if somebody is married, they have a spouse, they may be eligible for work authorization based on it being dependent to that spouse in their non-immigrant status, or if they're married to a U.S. citizen, that can be a little bit of a golden ticket and kind of a quick way to get into that. So I think it's always, as part of the strategy, it's always a good idea to look to spouses.
Well, so let me ask you about one.
Yeah.
This is one that comes up every year.
Okay.
It's the B1 in lieu of H-1B.
Yes, the magical B1 in lieu of H-1B. So
this is the unicorn.
Yes, it really is. So B1 in lieu of H-1B, I have seen it. It's been several years since I've seen anybody successfully pull this off. But it basically is an application that's made at a consulate outside of the US for a B visa for the purpose to come work in the United States under very specific conditions for a very temporary period of time. I've never seen it successfully used as an alternative to being selected for an H-1B. And I think in most instances, a B1 in lieu of H-1B is going to be approved for 6 months, maybe. But again, it's been like 7 or 8 years, I think, since I've seen one. I strongly discourage clients from looking at that because I think that it's just going to lead to frustration 99% of the time.
All right, so we're not putting that one on the list.
I'm not going to put that on the list,
right.
But I am going to get a T-shirt made for you that says, ask me about B1 in lieu of H-1B.
B1 in lieu of H-1B expert.
You should update your LinkedIn profile to show that. Chad, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. Just kind of to wrap this up, I think when you're counseling clients, when do you encourage them to start talking about this and developing these strategies?
So now's a good time to be looking at the list and to see who you have, who is on the list that this is their last option to get an H-1B. Either they get an H-1B this year or they're out of luck. Those are the individuals really to focus on right now, come up with a plan. My recommendation is to pull in all the stakeholders, meet with your attorney, meet with the employee, meet with the HR representative, meet with a supervisor, make sure everybody's on the same page. Because I think a lot of times, these lotteries and everybody's sort of putting all their hope into the lottery. And if it doesn't happen, it can feel devastating.
Yeah.
But if there's a good backup plan, then I think everybody can feel a lot more calm. They can focus on their work and sort of get ready to move on to plan B.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for joining us today. We hope that this has been helpful and kind of helping think about alternatives and developing backup plans for employees who may not be selected in the lottery. Certainly feel free to reach out to us with questions. We'd love to see comments and thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you and have a great week.
Thanks, y'all.